The Egyptian Sphinx is one of the most famous ancient sculptures in the world. But how much do you really know about it? In fact, it turns out that there is much more known about the Sphinx than one might imagine. Perhaps you won't even notice how much you didn't know about it until you watch this video. Let's start with the theory that many have proposed but no one has been able to prove: the existence of a hidden passage or tunnel beneath the Sphinx leading to underground chambers. This is the theory put forward by historian Simpson, who is convinced that there are corridors beneath the statue connected to the pyramids of Giza. Simpson believes that a secret passage was discovered during archaeological excavations in 1837 and that Colonel Howard Weiss, an Egyptologist, witnessed this event. However, Weiss and his team were somehow compelled to keep this discovery secret. Simpson's theory seemed absurd until hidden tunnels were discovered beneath the Giza Plateau in 2019. If there are indeed tunnels, they must lead somewhere. Assuming that the internal cavities of the Sphinx served some purpose, the connection between the pyramids and the nearby sculpture has a reasonable explanation. But the question remains, why were archaeologists and Colonel Weiss ordered to keep this discovery secret? This remains a mystery. A less controversial statement is that the Sphinx sculpture was carved from a single piece of rock. However, the monument was carved from solid limestone, likely by hundreds of workers until the Sphinx reached its current size of 73 meters in length and 20 meters in height. However, the modern Sphinx has been repaired and partially restored using limestone blocks. So its original form was somewhat different. An artistic or construction project of this scale would have been a colossal task for any modern construction or design company. It's astounding to think that the ancient Egyptians spent all those years building without anything more advanced than basic hand tools. We don't even know the name of the architect who oversaw this process. Unlike many other major sculptures and structures in Egypt, there are no inscriptions on the Sphinx allowing us to determine who created it. It's not surprising that some people believe it was created by extraterrestrials. Another statement that sparks debate is that the statue may have been intended as a representation of Anubis, the jackal-headed god. According to the widely accepted archaeological and historical version, the original face of the Sphinx was that of Pharaoh Khafre, but there are many who disagree with this view. Some scholars believe that the body of the statue symbolizes the lion, representing the constellation Leo. However, the lion held no special status in ancient Egyptian culture, unlike the dog-headed Anubis, which did. If we look again at the silhouette of the Sphinx with its flat back and position of the legs, does it not remind you of a dog? Another point to consider is that Anubis was considered the guardian of the necropolis. If, as some believe, the Giza Plateau is or was a necropolis, then the sculpture of Anubis overlooking it is quite understandable. We've already mentioned that there are no inscriptions on the Sphinx, so it's worth asking who built it. If we set aside the theory of Anubis and consider that the image is of Pharaoh Khafre, then the Sphinx must have been created between 2558 and 2532 BCE. However, there is no solid evidence for this. There is also no consensus on who built it, why it was built, or what its true purpose was. The lack of information about one of the largest sculptures in the world and the oldest known monumental sculpture in Egypt is concerning. We don't even know what this monument was originally called because, strangely, it is not mentioned in the literature of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. We know that during the New Kingdom era, it was called the Hor-em-Akhe Temple, but this was probably not its original name. The Sphinx was named as such only about 2,000 years ago. The absence of records about the construction of the statue and its name within a civilization that kept such detailed records raises suspicions and prompts us to consider whether these manuscripts were destroyed. And if so, why? The question that everyone is asking: what happened to the Sphinx's nose? The most popular version of events suggests that Napoleon Bonaparte's troops broke the nose of the sculpture during a military battle near Giza during the invasion of Europe in 1798. This version of events appears in some history textbooks. However, there is no direct evidence for this, no eyewitness accounts, and very little chance that this is actually true. In fact, all evidence points us in a different direction. According to the Arab historian al-Makrizi, the Sphinx's nose has been missing since the 15th century, and possibly even earlier. Al-Makrizi claims that the nose was destroyed by a Fatimid sheikh named Muhammad Siam al-Dar, but there is no evidence for this either. Another controversial theory suggests that the nose was intentionally broken by Europeans to hide the fact that it originally had a classical African appearance, which would prove that the ancient Egyptians were black. Let's continue this topic. There is another idea according to which the Sphinx's destruction was caused by erosion, but there is a problem here too. As we study the influence of water flow on the Sphinx, more evidence emerges suggesting that it is even older than previously thought. According to geologist Robert Schoch, the erosion visible on the Sphinx's flanks could only have occurred after thousands of years of regular rainfall. However, this part of Egypt has not had regular and continuous rainfall for over 7,000 years, according to Schoch's estimates. The erosion damage is estimated to be around 12,000 years old. If this could be proven, it would be unthinkable and would overturn all our notions of Egyptian history. It's fair to note that many of Schoch's colleagues vehemently disagree with him and consider his theory unserious. Nevertheless, the fact that there are visible water damage on the Sphinx at all makes us wonder. There are some uncomfortable questions that the accepted versions cannot answer yet. One of the most astonishing facts about the Sphinx is that in the 18th century, it was not visible to the naked eye. This once again shows why the theory that Napoleon broke its nose cannot be true. Until 1798, the monument was completely buried under Egyptian sand. It wasn't until its head began to peek out of the sand that people realized it existed at all. In the 1920s, French engineer Mile Barais began excavating it, a project that took him 10 years. Only in 1936 did modern people get their first glimpse of the Sphinx. 150 years prior, Italian explorer Giovanni Caviglia and French archaeologist Auguste Mariette made several attempts to excavate the statue, but both had to abandon their efforts as they were overwhelmed by the scale of the task. It cannot be that the Sphinx ended up buried so deep by chance. It's like suggesting that one day the sand could rise and swallow the Egyptian pyramids. The monument was definitely intentionally buried, but we still don't know who did it and why. We've touched on the next question at the beginning of this video, but let's examine it more closely. It deserves that much. Is it true that part of the Sphinx's head is missing? Does this mean that it once had a complete forehead profile and upper part of the skull, or perhaps, as some believe, it once had a beard on its chin? It's obvious that the Sphinx's nose has suffered greatly, but let's be honest, the rest of the face is not in the best condition either. Of course, after at least 4,500 years in the desert, some degree of deterioration can be expected. But not all the damage to the monument's face can be attributed to natural processes. It's entirely possible that this happened more than once. It may seem obvious, but the head is too small for the body. The Egyptians were never so careless about the proportions of their statues. It was something they paid particular attention to. Either the head is not original, which brings us back to the Anubis theory, or it was intentionally made small. Alternatively, it could have been carved and eroded to the point where little of its original features remain. Recently, another mystery related to the face of the Sphinx has emerged. It surfaced in a photograph published in 2022, showing the monument with closed eyes. Of course, this is impossible since the Sphinx's eyes have always been open since its excavation in the 1930s. Nevertheless, numerous images have circulated on social media depicting the sculpture with closed eyes, as if asleep. Some even declared it a sign of an impending apocalypse. However, most likely, this phenomenon has a simple explanation. There are two possibilities. First, the photographs of the Sphinx with closed eyes were taken from a very specific angle, creating a mere optical illusion. The second possibility is that someone edited the original image in Photoshop. Given that there are several photographs taken from different angles, the Photoshop explanation seems more plausible. We assure you that thousands of people have seen and photographed the Sphinx since then. Its eyes are still open. Earlier, we discussed the possibility of the Sphinx having a beard. We admit that this is not just a hypothesis but a real fact. It is known that a piece of the beard is preserved in the collection of the British Museum, one of many ancient Egyptian artifacts in the museum that, let's be honest, shouldn't be there. According to the official version of history, the fragments of the beard were found between the Sphinx's front paws in the 19th century. However, we know this to be untrue since the Sphinx's front paws were buried under layers of sand until the 1930s. It is disheartening and surprising that the recent history of this statue is as full of holes as its ancient history. Nevertheless, the Sphinx's beard exists, and there is a campaign in Egypt to gather all the pieces of the sculpture and reattach it to the monument. So, what is the main conclusion? The most important thing we didn't know about the Sphinx before and know now is that perhaps we no longer have the opportunity to determine its age, apart from the general consensus that it is definitely older than the pyramids it overlooks. It is quite likely that the age difference is several thousand years. Perhaps the monument was built before Pharaoh Khafre, around 2600 BCE. Or it existed by the time of his birth. The effects of erosion are suspicious, but if we talk about an age of 9,000 years or more, then we have to rule out the idea that it was built by ancient Egyptians altogether, or at least ancient Egyptians in our current understanding. This is not the same as saying it was influenced by extraterrestrials, as some theorists love to suggest. But it makes us wonder, who lived on this land before them? Perhaps even more mysterious is the purpose for which this Sphinx was carved. We have all seen photographs of this world-famous landmark, but how many of us have wondered why it is important to us? If this is indeed an image of Khafre, then it seems slightly strange even by the standards of Egyptian pharaohs. Creating something like this would set a serious precedent. Moreover, why then did none of Khafre's successors build their own Sphinx? On the other hand, if it was conceived as a huge sculpture of Anubis, why was it defaced? Why is the head much smaller than the rest of the body? And what happened to the original head? Why are there no written records of the sculpture's creation, its name, or the moment of its appearance? Was there a higher purpose behind it, or is it simply an impressive, gigantic monument that serves as a testament to the power and influence of a specific pharaoh at a specific moment in time? These are questions we don't have answers to. We hope that now you will ask yourself similar questions, and you enjoyed the journey to Egypt's most enigmatic monument. That's all from me. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon. Your engagement is the best reward for me. Thanks for your attention, see you soon. Goodbye.